If you ever looked at a Linux desktop screenshot, you've probably seen the humble fetch application. This is FastFetch. This is the one that I use. This is not the only one out there by a long shot. Sometimes there's a logo, sometimes there's not. Sometimes the logo is color, and sometimes you don't even have a desktop. But here's the thing. Outside of this one, which says it's FastFetch, and this one, which also says FastFetch, I wouldn't be able to tell you what tools these are actually using. This could be FastFetch. This could also be FastFetch. I don't know. And it's not because there is like heavy customization in these images. This is like a pretty standard look for one of these fetch applications, and this one has a custom logo. The reason why I don't know is there are so many of these fetch applications which all functionally do the exact same thing, in some cases literally do the exact same thing, that knowing which one is which, there's basically no way to tell unless you're told what it is. And if you've been around for a while, you probably know a handful of these tools. For example, Neofetch. Neofetch is definitely not the first one, but it is one of the ones that really made these fetch applications popular, and for a long time, this was basically the standard. It wasn't very fast as it was written in Bash, so a lot of other things came along, but this is what people think of and will still say Neofetch when they're talking about these generic fetch applications. You also have pfetch by the same developer. It's pretty much the same thing, except that all the customization is done like by manually modifying the script. Then you have things like highfetch, which is basically Neofetch if you like rainbow flags, and then obviously the correct choice, FastFetch. And this is a very short list of these applications. There is so many of these applications, in fact, that you can make a list of just these applications. You have your cross-platform tools, and obviously that is the main category. You even have some Windows-only tools. You have Linux-only tools, and you have some macOS-only tools, and there's like a whole mess of other things that you can play around with, like batfetch, for example, which is a command line tool that displays detailed information about the battery of your device in a clean and organized way. So this isn't even like about fetching your system resources. This is specifically about fetching battery information. Or iFetch for doing the same thing with your network interface, or GPU fetch for your GPU stuff, and I don't even know what this is. What is PHP fetch? Simple PHP and system information tool. This is about fetching your PHP information. Okay. There's even fetch tools directly for your Git repo to see how many commits have been done and things like that. You can fetch, like, the country there's a Gmod. What is Gmod fetch? I actually didn't even look at this part of the list. There's images, they're just not loading. Incredible. I don't know what this one is. It says, gfetch is a Neofetch clone for Gary's mod. Right, moving back to the regular fetch applications, you have some of these which could be kinda useful, like Archimedes. You have some amusing ones, like CuteFetch, which is just a fetch application with cute ASCII animals. You have some ones that have some additional flair, like Scroll, where it's intentionally slow because it looks like, you know, ooh, I'm an elite hacker, all this sort of stuff. Obviously excluding weird ones like this. When we look at the regular fetch application, you start to realize a lot of these are not actually providing any value. It's Neofetch, but in Rust, or in Python, or in C++, or in Go, or in C, or in Scala, or in Nim. Or there's one in here written in this language. Because why not? And when you notice things like that, you start to realize why these tools actually exist. Why are there so many of these? Why does everyone think that they can make their own fetch tool? They don't necessarily think that. So this is one of those very well-established problem spaces. This is a thing where, because there's a lot of examples of how to do it, it's something where you're not really going to struggle on trying to work out, oh, how do I solve this problem? The focus instead, in a lot of cases, is the language itself. All of these are open source because why not go and make it open source, as in a lot of cases, the devs don't actually care about this project. This is basically a few steps up from a Hello World program or making a linked list. This is a basic problem. It's a basic project, but it's one of those things where you're still not really, fully understanding the language you're working in. So you go and make a project that you don't really care about, but enough that it's going to sort of get you thinking in the context of that language. It's like going and making a calculator application or a simple HTTP server or a basic text editor. For others, they decide to make a fetch application as a way to go and kind of learn how a language functions and learn any of the idiosyncrasies about working with that language. Surely for some people out there, the reason why they made it is there was another fetch application out there and they wanted something that maybe ran a bit faster or had a combination of features from various different ones, and there was no way to do that with the tool they were using. So they said, okay, I'm going to go and make it myself. But most of these tools, they get made and then basically just get abandoned pretty much straight away. The ones that you know about because they're the very few tools that actually still get worked on. Some of these tools do go on to be more than just, oh, I'm learning a language, but that's all the reason that something actually needs to exist. Some people are kind of weird about open source, where if you're not writing something useful, why does it exist? Why even bother? And frankly, I don't really understand this mindset. I want to encourage people to go and work on the things that they want to work on. If you want to start a rewrite of something, go start a rewrite of something. If you want to go and fork a project and do your own thing with it, fork a project and do your own thing with it. Don't let anybody tell you that you shouldn't work on that project, that you're not allowed to work on that project, that your project just shouldn't exist. If you want to do something, if you want to make something, go and make it. That's awesome. If you want to look at it in a self-centered way, if you have more people that are working on things in general, that means that somewhere down the line, maybe that person is going to work on something that you actually use, and now there's more developers in this space in general, and this leads to a healthier open source ecosystem. In many ways, the Humble Fetch application is kind of similar to Rust rewrites we see on Linux as well. I don't mean the big and serious projects like utils, the Rust rewrite of the core utils, or sudo rs. These are projects that began with clear intentions and wanted to do something from the very beginning. I mean your, obviously, fetch applications. I mean the random terminal rewrites. Things like a terminal file manager, a fuzzy finder, the 1,000,001 different grep rewrites that don't really have any function to exist. There's already great rewrites that exist that are much better than GNU grep. None of the others really need to exist. But you shouldn't be concerned that someone is making a rewrite of an application that you use instead of contributing to the application itself. This developer, in a few months, in a few years, very well could be working on something that you find useful. Maybe they learn to write in Rust code and then migrate over to a different language and then work on, I don't know, KDE, work on GNOME, work on your favorite terminal editor, things like that. Not everything you do needs to be immediately useful. Not everything needs to have immediate value. Sometimes people just want to work on some skills and build themselves up, or even worse, just enjoy the process of building something. I don't think the existence of rewrites is this evil thing. And I know some people like to say, oh, well, this rewrite, it's being done in MIT, therefore it can be EEE, embraced, extend, extinguish, which just doesn't even make any sense because nothing changes with the original tool. So if a company came along and said, oh, this is ours now, firstly, you can just keep using the open source version, nothing actually changes. Secondly, the GPL version doesn't go away, so like it doesn't really matter. And thirdly, you weren't using the tool anyway, so like why does it even matter to you? Sometimes there is a bit of not invented here syndrome, and developers want to be the person who did the thing that everyone uses. They actually want to make a serious fetch application that is going to replace things like pfetch and highfetch, and some people are still using Neofetch, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Open source isn't this big company where you're assigned tasks and you have to be productive or you're going to get fired. Open source exists because there's a bunch of people that all wanted to do their own thing, and then some of those people aligned on specific goals and then started making bigger and bigger projects. Some people didn't like the direction some of these projects were going and then made their own thing. Things like Ex Libre, things like Mate, things like Cinnamon, things like the Budgie desktop. In some ways, things like KDE. KDE isn't like an original concept, it was inspired by the work of CDE. Frankly, even Xorg itself. Xorg spawned off of the X3D6 project after there was an absolute mess of maintenance. We started by talking about the Humble Fetch app, and then diverged into Rust rewrites, and this applies to rewrites of everything. Whether you want to talk Zig, you can talk like C rewrites, or C++ rewrites, or Go rewrites, or Python rewrites. At the end of the day, the main point I'm trying to make here is there's no reason to hate the fact that people are writing code, that people are getting involved in open source and making something. You don't need to use it, that's okay. But I don't think there's any reason to have a problem with people making things. But let me know your thoughts. Maybe you actually made a fetch application, maybe you work on one of the popular ones. Let me know. And when you first started programming, what was the first kind of like actual proper project you did? I'd love to know. So if you liked the video, go like the video. If you really liked the video and you want to become one of these amazing people over here, go subscribe as well. And check out the Patreon, subscribe to Stanley Barapay, linked in the description down below. That's going to be it for me, and fetch this outro.